And we'll go live too, if this will work. Hold on. And Sharia, while I'm doing this, go ahead and you can get started now.
Wonderful. First off, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are so excited to have the incredible Dr. Ned here
now.
That's
wonderful. First off, welcome. Okay, we're good now. So Dr. Ned is a diplomat of the American College of Veterinary Ophthalmologists and professor emeritus of ophthalmology from the UC Davis School of Veterinary Medicine. In 1981, he and Dr. Neil Wolfe founded the Association of Veterinarians for Animal Rights. And in 1989, he co-founded the incredible nonprofit Animal Place Sanctuary. And in 2003, he became the co-director of the Animal Protection Institute's Primate Sanctuary for non-human primates in Dilley, Texas. Dr. Ned is also the co-founder of Action for Primates, an organization that is seeking to raise awareness and encourage folks to take action on behalf of primates everywhere. So yeah, without further ado, I will pass it off to Dr. Crystal Heath for this incredible conversation with Dr. Ned. And just a reminder that folks who have any questions, feel free to put them down in the chat and we will do our best to get to them towards the end. And I will also leave a link to our honors newsletter and how folks can sign up. So yeah, take it away, Crystal.
Thank you all so much for joining us. If you all don't know what our honor is, we are a 501c3 nonprofit and we support veterinarians and vet students who face backlash and retaliation for voicing ethical concerns about what's going on in vet schools, what's going on in industry, government, and in our institutions. So we're here to support you. Reach out to us anytime. And I'm super excited to talk to Dr. Ned. He's a legend. I'm relatively new to the animal protection movement. And when I went to school at UC Davis, I didn't know anything about Dr. Ned. His name never came up. But Dr. Kirsten Rosenberg, who's my friend and one of my heroes, just recently talked about how Dr. Ned was her inspiration. She was in vet school in 1994, went to Dr. Ned's class, gave a talk on animal rights, which I feel like we could not, when I was in vet school at UC Davis, a lecture on animal rights would absolutely not be allowed. It would be an animal rights versus animal welfare sort of perspective. That would be very ag-centered. And Dr. Rosenberg then went to your sanctuary, Dr. Ned, and was inspired. And now she founded Happy Hen Animal Sanctuary, which is just a wonderful animal sanctuary. So you've been hugely inspirational to a whole lot of people. And I just want to know, where did it start? Like, what was your childhood like growing up? Did you have animals growing up? When did these kind of beliefs that we should be doing better for animals sort of come about?
I can't pinpoint a time, but I do know that my mother, who's dead now, was my primary source of inspiration, and it was through her efforts at teaching me to be kind towards other animals, to not be afraid of other animals, etc., that I was able to develop into the type of person I am now. My father was very supportive, but it took him a long time to get away from his upbringing. He was Turkish, he came from the old country, and he thought that animals were here just to be used and killed and eaten, or that certain animals were to be feared, etc. And but he came around. My mother was a good convincer, and so I owe anything good that I provide, if there is any, I owe it to my mother.
Did you all have animals growing up in your household?
Well, yes, we had dogs, and unfortunately, we also, back then, before my quote enlightenment, unquote, I used to capture wild animals and keep them as so-called pets.
Uh-huh.
I did that for a long time as a child before I realized that that was the wrong thing to do. But back then, of course, we never thought about it. We just thought we weren't harming anybody. And particularly if you let the animals go after you've had them for a short period, we just figured, what is the harm in that? Of course, now I look back with chagrin, and I just think that I was on a very, very wrong foot back then. I just hope that by admitting that, and I've done that many times, that people who have those inclinations do not have to make the same kind of moral mistake and then have to suffer the the emotional consequences of having done those kinds of things.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I grew up in 4-H. I remember going fishing. My dad hunted, and then that may be one of those stories, like he hunted and he shot a deer, but the deer ran away, and then he found the body later, and it was very traumatizing for him. And we all kind of over time just given the safe space to sort of rethink our habits and not feel bad about being wrong about what we did in the past. So when did you decide to sort of go to veterinary school?
I decided sometime in my in my senior year of high school, I think. I had wanted to be a biologist, a zoologist to be specific, and even more specifically to be a herpetologist, because my great passion was snakes and other reptiles. But and I was going to be able to get into any school I wanted to pretty much because of my grades. But then one night I just thought, why don't I try to help other animals in a different way? And of course, I had no idea what zoology was in terms of what zoologists actually do day to day, which is mostly exploit, kill, and harm other animals. So I thought I would go to veterinary medical school, and was able to get in and graduate.
Wow. So, but what was your vet school experience like? Because I
Another
imagine
one of those horrible situations where
Yeah.
you don't have any guidance, you don't have anybody challenging you, you have no mentors whatsoever in terms of ethics or morality. Your heroes, your idols are your professors, because they wear the white coats. They're where you want to be in terms of having a degree and having stature, etc. It's the 1960s. It's a long time ago. And when they tell you that you will learn properly by taking this dog and taking her apart organ by organ over a period of several weeks, that is the best way to teach you how to do surgery, for example, you just accept it, even though inside I did have concerns, but I looked around me, I didn't see anybody else expressing concerns. I didn't see any professors expressing any kind of concern. There was never an argument or a different point of view brought out by the professors saying, even if they had said, well, some people don't think this is appropriate to do, that could have helped in my case, or possibly many of my classmates. I don't know how they felt, because we never talked about it. It was taboo. You just didn't do it.
Yeah, I'm kind of reminded of that psychological experiment where everybody's sitting in a waiting room, and then smoke starts to creep in the waiting room, and there's like one normal person, and the rest of the people are trained actors told like to ignore the smoke. And the one normal person just kind of, they see nobody else around them is concerned about this smoke thing, so they just sit there and act like everything is normal most of the time. And only a small percentage of people actually speak up. Right. But then you have a room where there's a bunch of normal people, Suddenly more people are willing to speak up if one person speaks up.
Right.
So I think that's the case with a lot of things that are still going on in veterinary schools, and a lot of things the veterinary profession is still endorsing. We just need one person often to speak up, and then everybody will be like, yes, oh my gosh, there's smoke in this room.
Right.
And we should do something about this. So did you, and when I was in vet school, I was going through a lot of mental health issues. I was in a relationship with an alcoholic. I owned a business and was running that. And I did not have the bandwidth to deal with ethical things or like stick my neck out there and say, this is wrong. And I did on occasion. And I didn't like the way some horses were handled. And I started speaking up, and I videoed it at one point, and I got, the hammer down, and I actually got my grade deducted in that class for being unprofessional when a horse was handled inappropriately, I thought. So that was kind of I've been signed out from my account. Sorry. So that was kind of like my experience, why I didn't say more. And I'm sure a lot of vet students are going through that. Was there any instance where you spoke up in vet school, or did you wait until later, until you had some sort of power?
I don't honestly remember when I was in veterinary medical school whether I spoke up about anything in particular. I'm almost certain I did, because even at that time, even though I was being enculturated and indoctrinated by the status quo with respect to what we should do to other animals in the name of education, I was adamantly opposed to hunting. I was adamantly opposed to trapping. I was adamantly opposed to fishing. And I made my views known, although kind of along the lines that you were saying about your own personal life while you're in veterinary medical school, I was absorbed by school. I mean, it was an arduous situation, and I was young, very young, and I wanted to succeed, but I also wanted to live a reasonable life. And I guess I just didn't have the wherewithal or the enlightenment, if you will, to start making a big deal of it at that time. I knew that I would meet a tremendous backlash by some of my classmates, and perhaps even by some of my professors, but that really wasn't an issue. I wasn't there yet to start dealing with these issues. It wasn't until I got out of school, and really it wasn't until I got to the University of California when I started realizing that I was being very dishonest about my own feelings, and I needed to start speaking up. And I started speaking up from pretty much the first day I arrived in 1979. And of course, I didn't know that by speaking freely about things that the First Amendment was not being honored at schools like the University of California, Davis, that there was no such thing as free speech. You went the party line, or else you got punished for it. And I remember vividly two instances that happened early on. I had written an editorial about how I thought it was hypocritical for veterinarians to treat animals in the clinic, help these individuals, and then go home and hunt and kill animals. And I got a strong reprimand from the chief of the hospital, the veterinary medical hospital, where of course I was a professor. And he basically read the Riot Act to me and said that you need to be very careful about what you do. Many of us hunt, and it's fine to do so, and you really should not be speaking out like that. And then the other instance that sticks in my mind is I was testifying against compound 1080, sodium monofluoroacetate, in Sacramento at a legislative hearing. And in front of me was a professor, full professor, of environmental something or other. And he turned around and he was a huge proponent of 1080. And I was always disagreeing with him every avenue that came up. He turned around and looked at me before I testified, and he said, just remember, you're just a lowly assistant professor, and you don't have tenure. I'm paraphrasing. You don't have tenure, and it's not good for you to do this, what you're going to do. I did it anyway. I said, screw him.
That's yeah. I feel like people always say, like, I'm going to speak out once I graduate. I'm going to speak out once I finish my residency. I'm going to speak out once I get a professor position. And it's like, once I get tenure, then I'll be able to. But like, people should be so angry. They're telling you what you can and can't say. That's like the most basic human right. We should be able to say what we think, and to not be able to do that or else face professional backlash is just so oppressive.
Well, even at my level, I was told by a couple of people, I won't mention names because I don't know if they would appreciate it, but they were professors there, and they took me aside out of concern for me. They said, look, wait until you get tenure and then start speaking out. They didn't necessarily agree with me. It's just that they understood the process, that if I waited until I got tenure, that then I would be protected, or so I thought, because I wasn't protected. But what happened is I thanked them for the advice, but I could not speak out. But you bring up a very important point. Blending it with what you've been saying and what my experience was in veterinary medical school, I think had I had somebody who was a professor and who expressed concern and didn't agree with the status quo and provided cogent reasons why not to agree, I think that I could have gone in a different direction in veterinary medical school and possibly been a lot more vocal and done more at that stage. And so when I got to Davis, for example, and I started doing what I was doing, I made it clear to the students that if they had any concerns, that they should come to me and I would act as their advocate in going to the administration, so that they would know that even if they feared things, that they had somebody who was in a position of authority to some degree, whatever, that they could then know that somebody would have their back, to put it mildly, bluntly, and that I would stand up for them. And I did that for every student. I had undergraduate students come to me in tears sometimes about what they were being forced to do, and I tried to work with the administration and the undergrad part of the school to allow students at least to have the right of conscience, so that they could do the kinds of things that they wanted to do, that they felt were morally acceptable.
That's amazing. I mean, we just need more like that, more professors like that. And a lot of schools don't even have that. So that's why I founded Our Honor. So hopefully if any students have concerns, they don't have anybody they can reach out to, they know they can reach out to us. And there's a lot of different things we can do. And we have hundreds of veterinarians supporting us. So you have like a huge support network of people. We have media connections, we have legal connections. So we'll be able to get you the help that you need. But when you're a professor, I mean, they're from vet school to the 80s, there's a lot of changes that happened in pain management in animals. Like before, from what I understand, even in surgery, all they had was a paralytic, like way back in the day, and no pain control for animals. Veterinary medicine didn't really acknowledge even pain in animals until later on. So what was that like, that seeing that transition in the field?
Well, for whatever reason, that wasn't my experience. We always used analgesics. We had some very good anesthesiologists who were part of the faculty and who took their profession very seriously, and they often would be at loggerheads with the surgeon, for example, over what should be done for a particular patient. We would never, I mean, we understood what neuroparalytics were, and we would never use them alone without appropriate depth of anesthesia. So we didn't have that experience.
Oh, okay, good. That's interesting. I was just reading Bernard Rowland's book. Were you ever in touch with him, Bernard Rowland?
Oh yeah, long before he died. He and I had worked together on many issues also.
Yeah.
I've been very fortunate in being able to get to know and work with some very good people who are dedicated and who actually trying to do something good for this, for the world, so to speak.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you were saying about Bernie's, what?
Yeah, I remember in his book, he was talking about, I guess in horses or something, they would just do that for castrations. I know even now in vet schools, they do a lot of dehorning, castration of baby goats, sheep and stuff. And there's just now, they're starting to require anesthesia for tail docking and disbudding. And that's what the Association of Small Ruminant Practitioners is now recommending. And now the bovine practitioners are finally recommending pain control for dehorning. So, though there are some changes, but I want to hear from you, what was the main issue that caused UC Davis to really push back against you? I think with your lab, you wanted to change it to only animals who were suffering from a disease and who would be euthanized anyway, instead of healthy animals being killed for a lab. And then there was a lawsuit with UC Davis. Tell us that whole story.
Well, I don't want to get into too much about that, but what I did when I got to Davis, I looked around and watched what was being done in terms of surgical instruction, general surgical instruction, ophthalmic surgical instruction, and physical examinations, diagnostics, clinical skills, etc. And when I got control of the required basic course in ophthalmology, which I assume you must have taken, it was a required course back then, VMD. I can't remember the number, but the professor who was teaching it moved up into administration, and so I took over the course, and I immediately instituted two changes. One was that no longer would we use laboratory animals or animals from the laboratory, if you will, in any clinical skills laboratory for the students. That the only way I was going to teach that course was if the students brought their own companion animals in and used them, and I would bring my own companion animals and use them. And of course, this provided a lot of benefits. The animals sometimes liked it, they didn't always, but the students got to learn how a client must feel when we as veterinarians are doing things we know are innocuous or that are important to do to the patient, because the students would say, oh gosh, I don't want to do that to my dog. And I would point out, you're going to do this to a client's dog, you better get used to this and know that you're not doing it to harm the individual, et cetera. I don't want to get into a long thing about that, but what they have been doing is taking dogs from the vivarium, it's called. They bring them in. These are dogs who were from the pound, and then the students would use them. They would cycle through many labs, and then eventually they'd end up in a research project where they'd be killed, or they'd be killed in a surgical lab. So I instituted that, got away with that. Nobody complained. Well, actually, the associate dean of instruction complained about it. He said that I was creating a problem for the school. And I said, well, I don't mean to, but this is the way it's going to be. And he didn't push it any further. Then it got to the surgical laboratory, and there I offered students an alternative because I wasn't ready yet to push the envelope completely. But I said, any student who doesn't want to participate in the lab with the animal who's going to be killed should let me know, and I will work out an alternative way of teaching you basic ophthalmic surgery, which is all we were teaching the students.
Mm-hmm.
And several students did take advantage of that. And so I made it official the next time the lab came up, and I submitted a protocol to the campus veterinarian to make it official. And he shunted it to my department chair, who then called me in and said, you can't do that. You have no authority to do that. I said, I do. I'm the professor. I teach. You tell me what to teach, and I teach it in the way I think it should be taught.
Yeah.
He disagreed. And so I appealed. It went up the ladder. And eventually, just a week or so before the course was going to start, I was removed from the course. And then I wrote a letter to all the students, and I said, you've been deprived of the option of an alternative if you wanted one. You know, I was willing to work with you to do this, etc. I said, but if you like, when the new professor starts teaching the course, if you have objections to killing animals in the lab, let me know, and I will work with the professor to the extent that I can to try to come up with an alternative and see if he's willing to do that. That letter I sent to every student who was going to take that course, 120 some students. And it got to the administration, and within a month or so, I received a notice that I was in violation of faculty code of conduct, and that they were going to ask for the most severe punishment, which was termination of my contract.
Wow.
But needless to say, that scared the hell out of me. And
Yeah.
I think I was tenured at the time. I can't remember now.
Wow.
But it was a very frightening situation. And so I appealed to the Committee on Privilege and Tenure. I appealed to other committees. I appealed to the dean, to the chancellor. There was no, they just didn't care. They said, we're going to proceed with this case. So I had to hire an attorney, and we sued them for breach of First Amendment and 14th Amendment rights, and we won.
Yes.
Every decision that was made along the course of the proceedings was in my favor, which was very good. I mean, I'm not, bragging or anything. I just feel very fortunate that I had one, a very good attorney who was very sympathetic, and then two, I had very good records. I kept excellent records on everything that happened, the conversations, meetings,
Mhm.
etc. And
Yeah.
so that's what happened there. Unfortunately, that didn't result in any monumental changes, but it did. I did see a softening of the approach by the administration to students who had objections. And
Mhm.
eventually, by the time I left, they were in the process of doing away with terminal surgeries in the required surgical instruction course. I'm hoping that you also had that option, I hope that was the norm for you.
Yeah. So I never had to participate in killing animals for surgery. And right now, I love surgery. Like, that's the main thing that I do as a vet. And we had an access to care model where animals who needed surgery would come to the school, and we would perform surgery on them under the guidance of an experienced surgeon. I also volunteered at the shelter third year and would do spays and neuters there. And I absolutely love surgery and don't feel like I missed out at all. But your student, Dr. Kirsten Rosenberg, in the early 90s, she went through that surgical class, and she was a conscientious objector and took cadaver. And this is unfortunately what's happening in many schools is, oh, you don't want to do the terminal lab? Well, then here we're going to give you a cadaver, which is not a good replacement for surgery on a live animal. So they feel like they're missing out because the alternative is so much worse, you know,
Well,
of an
of course,
experience.
the cadaver they were offering initially were simply animals who were going to be used in a terminal surgery, and they just simply killed them. So it's not like you were doing anything to improve the moral situation. But
Yeah.
eventually they realized that, and it's because of students who objected to the source of the cadavers, who they realized that they're going to have to modify their approach and make sure that these cadavers are what they call ethically sourced.
Yeah, a lot of schools did like the willed body program. So clients, when their dogs were
Yeah,
euthanized, they would will them their bodies to school. But still, like surgery on a dead animal will only do so much. I mean, you're missing out in both the terminal surgery case and doing surgery on a cadaver, the opportunity to see your patient wake up from surgery, manage their pain afterwards, and talk to their caretaker about how to care for them afterwards. Like that's like the most important part of surgery that students are missing out on.
yeah, I know. And I've always raised this issue with my colleagues when they talk about how we absolutely have to have live animal surgery and kill the animals. I point out that we don't do that in human medicine. And I know not every physician who graduates with any experience in surgery necessarily, and residencies are a heavy component of surgical instruction in the human medicine world. But still, we don't do to human beings what we do regularly and champion to other animals and claim that it's absolutely necessary, and it's not. You pointed out the excellent model, if you will, of using patients who need surgery, and particularly if it's indigent situations or low-income families, et cetera, where you can help the people as well as the animal, and of course, like you said, with strict supervision, so that you're not a loose cannonball in there. You learn, and you learn much better in the long run, as far as developing your surgical skills and your compassion and your sensitivity to the situation.
Absolutely. And there's to the problem, the veterinary profession, it lacks diversity and inclusion. And you have many students from Eastern religions who believe that they shouldn't harm other beings. And so they're put in a position of either betraying their ethics or just not going to veterinary school. And so we miss out on having colleagues that come from that background of Eastern religions or different belief systems who believe that we shouldn't be harming animals. And it kind of just betrays our whole, the idea of 3 R's. We know that there's a replacement and a refinement here that we are not taking advantage of. So yeah, it's just super interesting how that has grown. And sadly, there's still some schools that do terminal surgeries, but I think things are changing. So that's something that is really, really great to see that advancement. So oh, sorry.
I know I was shocked to see in a recent edition of the Journal of Veterinary Medical Education, I think it was, or no, maybe it was the AVMA Journal, where I believe it was Tuskegee had purchased, I think, a dozen or so Sindaber simulators. Because I think I spoke to Tuskegee years ago, and they were, of course, not just terminal surgery or not just live surgeries, but survival surgeries was the norm back then. And it's interesting to see that there is progress in that vein. And for Tuskegee, and I'm not maligning them, but for them to come from a position of adamant live animal kill at the end kind of surgery to now looking at something like Sindavers as a way of teaching clinical skills and surgical skills. That's progress.
That is awesome progress to hear. And I'm looking through some FOIA protocol documents from a lot of different schools, and I'm shocked multiple survival surgeries do
Yes.
still happen at some schools on species like cows, which
Yes.
I was shocked to learn that that still happens. So at what point did
But
you?
the thing is, Crystal, the thing is, when we did away with survival surgery at Davis long before I got there. They had done away with it because of one professor's adamant stand against it. He said it's just inhumane. We can't justify it. We'll just kill them every week rather than allow them to live. But they did away with that. Yet, as you pointed out, the hypocrisy was that you could do multiple survival surgeries on cattle and horses. And in fact, abdominal surgery, laparotomies on horses, and allow them to survive. And then, of course, eventually kill them. But this mindset and this disconnect between a dog and a cow or a horse were identical in terms of pain reception, et cetera. It's just astounding.
Yeah, and it's like, what do we learn that pain pathways are conserved across all species.
Yeah.
We use that for our benefit to test drugs for humans on animals. And yet here we are, we're like ignoring this. And what does that do to our own moral development? You know, it's stunted when we have to like just completely shut off and ignore these things. And I'm reminded of, I've talked to a couple of people recently who are like, we just don't want to get into these fruitless discussions on morality and ethics. It's like, why are we here then? What is the purpose of all this if we're not going to engage in these discussions?
Well, but that's the most important thing.
Yeah.
If you don't look at things from a moral perspective, using moral principles to dissect the arguments, et cetera, they're just, to me, then you're not accomplishing anything. You have to do it that way. When my colleagues in the non-human animal protection movement talk about, that they say that we need to approach this in the research situation as bad science. And yes, some of it is very bad science, there's no question. But as I point out, that can be overcome in various ways. Unfortunately, mice have suffered the most in that respect with genetic manipulation, et cetera. But you can't get away from the moral arguments. The moral arguments are what stand the test of time, because if you can convince somebody that a mouse who has the same basic features that you have in terms of wanting to live, pain perception, the potential to suffer, desires, interests, and the more we learn about them, the more we learn how complex their interests are, et cetera, then you can then make somebody realize that what we do to them in the name of science can't be defended whatsoever. It doesn't matter how good the science is. The morality dictates we must not ever do to them what we would not do to our own children or to our loved ones or to even another human being. I mean, hell, we don't even, a rational person would never, ever consider doing to even a human prisoner what we do daily to mice and non-human primates and rats, et cetera. So the moral issue is the most important issue as far as I'm concerned. That trumps everything.
Absolutely. And there was that great article, what was it in the New Yorker recently about mice and how we're really seeing, because the mice are so stressed and unhappy, the science, that the results that are produced are so bad. But there's also this huge problem of all these scientists and researchers, and I've talked to many who like study neuroscience or other things. Then they find themselves in a lab working on thousands of knockout mice, not getting any results. So then they end up leaving the field because they're so upset by the way these animals are treated, what they're doing, what their profession has become, just sort of this wheel of creating more and more knockout mice to print out these studies and the state of science right now and research is just all, it's all messed up. I mean, there's pharmaceutical companies are making bank off of this system of creating these animal models and all of this laboratory equipment to house them, and then putting these scientists in there, and like, what are we getting out of it? I think we're missing out on a lot of great discoveries because we're plugging people into this system that is broken and harmful. So at what point did you start AVAR, Association of Veterinarians for Animal Rights, and what was that like?
Well, I met Neil Wolf. I can't remember. Well, I guess I met him through a letter he wrote to me because he had seen my publications against hunting, etc. And he said, we need to do something. We should start an association of veterinarians who don't believe that we should be doing these things to other animals. So I agreed, and I came up with the idea of AVAR, and we founded it, and we worked very hard at trying to get changes made over the years that AVAR was in existence, I think for about 20 or so years, and just kept pushing and pushing. I don't know what we've accomplished. I think we did accomplish some things, but change is slow. It's incremental, and sometimes you don't even see it in your lifetime. But I think we did some very good things. We challenged veterinary medical schools. We provided educational material on alternatives to every veterinary medical school in the United States and to some foreign schools. We challenged the NIH about the research that they were doing on monkeys, in particular, maternal deprivation and things like that. So yeah, we did some pretty good things with AVAR. I had to leave AVAR in 2003, I think it was, because I was appointed. I had retired from the university, and I was appointed as a co-director of the primate sanctuary in Dilley, Texas, which you mentioned. Yeah. It now belongs to Born Free, and that was a very consuming position. I did it as an avocation, not as a profession. I wanted to do it because the conditions at that primate sanctuary at the time were problematic, and I wanted to see if I could improve the situation, along with my wife, who was also appointed a co-director of the sanctuary. So that's where I lost touch with AVAR, and then I heard that it had become absorbed into the Humane Society of the United States and was now being called the Humane Society Veterinary Medical Association. I don't know much about what they do. I know some of the people who are involved, and they were involved with AVAR, and they're good people. I don't know whether they're proactive. So I can't say much about what's happened in that direction.
Yeah, I'm a member of the HSVMA, but I'm also a member of the AVMA. And Barbara Hodges is here in the chat, who is on the board of HSVMA. It's a great organization, but what they're up against is the AVMA. I mean, HSVMA has 9,000-ish members, and then you have the AVMA with 100,000 members, and the AVMA is able to influence policy on a government level. The USDA looks to the AVMA guidelines to set policy and taxpayer bailouts for. Now we have this situation of avian flu and how the birds are being killed, mostly using this method of mass killing with heat stroke, where they seal up barns, pump in heat and steam, and wait for hours for the birds to die. And this is listed in the AVMA guidelines on depopulation as a method to be used in constrained circumstances, without necessarily listing what constrained circumstances actually means. And so we started this campaign, Veterinarians Against Ventilation Shutdown. Over 1,500 have signed on, asking the AVMA to reclassify this as not recommended, which would mean that producers could still do it. Producers could still kill the birds this way, but it would revoke the veterinary profession's moral authority. Producers could no longer say that they were using veterinary approved methods. And the USDA, it's not the producers who decide to do this. or who even pay for it, it's the USDA. The USDA comes in, they decide what method to use to kill the birds, they pay for it. So this is all taxpayer money. And then the USDA pays bailouts to producers for doing it this way. And I think everybody just thought, ventilation shut down, that's just the method that's going to be used. Nobody pushed back. And this is the situation we're in now, where tens of millions of birds are being killed via this horrible method. And we're pushing back. But unfortunately, like I have seen now, suddenly the AVMA is not allowing me to go to their symposiums. They denied me access. There was a legislative fly-in that I signed up to go to, and they said, we canceled your registration. And they wouldn't give me a reason why. And from what I'm hearing now, they're telling people, oh no, we allow all perspectives to come. But those people who we denied, they were a threat. But like as if we were dangerous. And this is deeply concerning. Like we're being smeared as people who are dangerous. And that is like how many people have been told this about us. So that's what we're up against. I mean, the Humane Ending Symposium that we were denied membership to, or denied admission to, was actually sponsored by Cargill. So a lot of people are saying, you know what, you shouldn't even be a member of the AVMA anymore. But it's like no other group is able to influence policy in the United States for how animals are treated. So either we could start our own group, but that's a huge undertaking. Even HSVMA, who has the backing of HSUS, who is a huge organization, it's still, even though HSUS has hundreds of millions of dollars, it's not Cargill with billions of dollars.
Right.
But
the other thing is that we have to keep in perspective is that the AVMA depend on, and the veterinarians involved, depend on the exploitation of other animals to make a living. It's a financial situation. You have HSVMA who, whatever they do, they don't do it to make money. It's not a livelihood. I mean, there are people who are making a salary, but it's not done in a for-profit situation. Whereas the AVMA, they are doing this as a for-profit situation to get their members to make a living, a good living in terms of finances, et cetera. So when you have the financial incentive there, it's going to be an uphill battle. But I think you've alluded to an important issue, although it's extremely difficult, and that's to be a member of the AVMA, because you will not be listened to outside the AVMA. And of course, you're finding out that you're not being listened to inside. But if you're outside, you will never get anywhere with them. They're just absolutely intransigent, as I've learned over the years. I was a member for a long time and then gave up my membership and found that it was very difficult to do anything at that point. At least as a member, you have the right to object to things, and they have an obligation to listen to you. At some level. They may listen to you and then turn around and do whatever the heck they want, but you at least have that opportunity. And the more you speak out, of course, the more likely it is that others who feel like you but who have been intimidated may come forward and challenge the AVMA's position. And eventually something good may come of it. I mean, I challenged the leg hold trap position that they had for years and years. And finally, they admitted that the leg hold trap was inhumane. They've now updated their policy. That it used to be very simple. Leg hold traps are inhumane, or the use of them is inhumane. They've updated their policy to be slightly more wishy-washy, but at least it wasn't carte blanche in terms of they supported the use of any leg holding device to trap animals for whatever purpose. So you can get something done. It's just exceedingly slow.
And Karen Davis is a huge inspiration. I think you know her too, of United Poultry Concerns.
So.
in 2004, she opposed the AVMA's policy of forced molting and
Yes.
did some protests. They also took out a full-page ad in the New York Times. There was a New York Times article about it. Ultimately, that pressure campaign led the AVMA to change their policy on forced molting. And I think it takes that that media pressure, those New York Times articles, which we are starting to get more and more journalists interested in this. You know, journalists are very fascinated by, like, veterinarians who are supposed to be protecting animals are facing backlash for protecting animals. How absurd is this? And then you have corporate capture, taxpayer bailouts for these things. And then these big companies like Cargill getting taxpayer grant funding to expand their businesses, USDA grants, all these things. So I think it's a really compelling story that if we keep at it, we'll build more momentum and hopefully make some changes. But we're up against literally the most powerful and abusive industry on the planet, which is animal agriculture and the pharmaceutical companies. So,
right. That's one of the things that I try to emphasize to undergraduate students who've come to me in various forms, whether it's letters, email, in person, third hand, whatever. They've asked whether they should go to veterinary medical school because they felt the way they did, or whether they should go to law school so that they could approach the issues legally. I've always said, go to veterinary medical school because we need people who truly advocate unequivocally for the non-human animal, because without that, the law isn't going to be of much value. And there are plenty of attorneys who can defend situations adequately in terms of animal abuse, et cetera. But we need more veterinarians who speak out against the status quo, just like you are doing, and just like you've talked about with the AVMA, et cetera. Because even though we're not always taken seriously by our colleagues, we are taken seriously to some degree by the public, by the news media, and also we have, because of our credentials, even though we're not always taken seriously, there is some credibility to what we say. Whereas if you're an attorney or some other profession that isn't medically oriented, you can say whatever you want. You can say non-human animals suffer. You can say this is wrong, that's wrong. But you're not going to be looked at with the same degree of credibility, perhaps, as a veterinarian might.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I'm seeing now the importance of veterinarians lending legitimacy to some of these animal rights campaigns that were dismissed as just propaganda, or their footage is dismissed as highly edited propaganda. So recently we worked with Raven Deerbrook. She captured, and this is, you know, from hearing me talk to animal rights activists, I've, you know, been very critical of their campaigns and the videos that they put out, because they're all these short clips, highly edited. It's like, we need, you know, hours of streaming footage so people can see what it's actually like. And so she released 16 hours of footage uncut from inside a gas chamber in a slaughterhouse. And then we got livestock veterinarians to look at this footage, Dr. Temple Grandin to look at this footage. We wrote a statement, you know, a very scientific statement citing the science about it. And now we have over 150 veterinarians signed on to it. So that makes this whole campaign of these pigs were not killed humanely, this is a violation of the Humane Methods of Slaughter Act, so much more valid. And we need veterinarians to testify in court against these corporate agriculture businesses too. So there's just so many opportunities here. So tell me about what you're working on now with primates and what your campaign is with your current organization.
We campaign broadly on excuse me, on all non-human primate issues, but I guess you could say that the trade in lives, the so-called primate trade, where non-human primates are bought and sold, raised in captivity, to be used in research or toxicity or poisoning testing, et cetera. That's a big part of our campaign. We're trying to get airlines to stop transporting these. We've been very successful so far in getting a number of getting a number of airlines to commit to stopping the transport of non-human primates to laboratories. That's a huge thing, because if we can get them to stop, then it'll go a long way in terms of relieving the suffering that these individuals experience in the transportation. Of course, it's not going to stop their use. We know that. It may help limit some uses, but we know that the primary thing is to try to get the public to change their view and to support the idea that whether you care about mice, rats, dogs, cats, insects, other invertebrates, etc., surely you must see that non-human primates are about as close to you and your children as you could physically and emotionally get. And that if we're going to start somewhere, and this I know is arguably speciesist, we need to start with a total ban on the use of non-human primates in all testing, all research, etc. Barring that, we need to at least do away with certain types of research: maternal deprivation, substance abuse, dietary research, brain function research. These need to stop immediately. And we've been campaigning to the NIH about this, to the various branches of NIH, and we're getting nowhere with them. They don't even respond to us anymore. Actually, I shouldn't say that. One director of, I forget which of the institutes, but she responded through her assistant and gave the usual party line garbage about supporting the research, et cetera. And so I wrote back to her personally and asked her if she would treat her children. I said it in a very nice way, scientifically. I said, would you consider it morally appropriate to use children in these kinds of research, knowing that you might come up with something incredible, because children are very much like children. So no response. We've been doing this for a number of years. The other issue is non-human primates as so-called pets. And the issue that is taking up a lot of our time right now is the so-called monkey hatred situation, where people, particularly in Southeast Asian countries, are capturing macaques, young macaques, often taking them away from their mother after they kill the mother, and subjecting them to the most horrible situations in captivity in order to produce videos that are then displayed on social media platforms that are accessible by everybody: Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, etc. And some of these things involve, and I've seen the footage, this isn't doctored stuff, pouring lighter fluid on a baby macaque and then setting her on fire, cutting off a macaque's arm while she's awake, and then cutting her throat afterwards because she didn't die quickly enough, I guess. Scaring, I mean, those are some of the most horrendous things. Spread eagling a macaque infant to a board or a fence and then beating her. These things, that's why they're called monkey hatred. These people ostensibly hate these macaques and do this. And people throughout the world, particularly in the United States, are paying to have these videos made by these people in Southeast Asia. And we're doing our best to try to get this stopped. The big thing is that people like, or groups like Facebook, they're not doing much to stop it. Even when we report the abuses, they don't take action against the people in terms of removing the content and then blocking the people. We've had some success, though. We've gotten a few people in Southeast Asia arrested for violation
wow.
of their country's animal protection laws. We're doing more, and we hope to have some more success stories. But those are the kinds of things that I've been working on through Action for Primates.
Yeah, that's shocking because I posted videos of me doing surgery. I posted videos of like gestation crates or, like some clips from this new slaughter footage. And those are often taken down for graphic content or whatever. I'm shocked that these videos where animals are actually being tortured for entertainment are not being taken down.
No, it's inconceivable, and I'm as confounded by this as you are. We show a picture of a monkey being tortured as an educational thing. We're trying to get people to take action, to write letters to the government of Cambodia, for example, or to write to their legislators in the UK to try to get this, what's called the UK online safety bill. We're trying to get passed here in the UK so that people who companies like Facebook will not be allowed to post those kinds of videos if they're accessible to people in the UK. So we do this educationally, and Facebook gets upset with us, but then they allow pictures of monkeys being trapped in plastic bottles, being attacked by dogs. I've just been reviewing that in the last couple of days. Monkeys being subjected to crocodiles.
Oh my gosh.
So these are infant monkeys. It's almost always infants because of course they're easier to handle.
Oh, that's so true.
So yeah, it's amazing that certain things, I guess visually, Facebook won't accept, but emotionally they will allow other things to go through. I don't understand it personally.
Yeah, I kind of get the impression that when I've posted things about factory farming practices, or like I posted on my YouTube channel video of what it looks like inside Ridgeland Beagle Labs, like the cages, and these 4,000 beagles stuck in these cages. That was taken down and my entire YouTube channel was blocked, shut down. But what I did was I posted that on a veterinary Facebook group, only like a private veterinary Facebook group. And I think the lab animal vets kind of targeted it and shut it down. It seems like it's always industry who has a targeting campaign to shut these things down. Unfortunately, like, because they don't want that footage out there of what it actually looks like inside of farms or inside of labs. So it's not like actual compassionate people reporting it. It's usually industry.
No, of course not. It's money. Everything is money oriented. What I was talking about with the monkey hatred channels, those are often monetized. So people are making money off of those channels. Facebook is making money off of the clicks and likes and whatever. I mean, I don't understand it all. Don't want to understand it all, but I just want to see it all gone, really.
It's so disturbing. The human like desire for blood. What is there anything that kind of gives you hope for the future? How do you get through knowing that people are doing these horrible things to animals? There's kind of this innate violence inside us. What is your vision for the future? What is possible? What keeps you going?
Well, those are very different because, what keeps me going is the knowledge that I'm extremely privileged. I'm not going to be put into a situation like other animals are going to be put into regularly, daily, night and day. And I owe them something because of that. I owe them my life, really, to try to do everything I can to help them. And in my darkest moments, I just think about what it would be like for me not to speak out. Not that I'm not great or anything, and not that I'm highly influential or whatever, but if I don't speak out, I know nothing will change. Whereas if I do speak out, at least I offer some hope for change. And that's what keeps me going. As far as what I see for the future, I'm sorry to say, I see it as extremely bleak. The more I see of what humans do to other animals and to the environment, the less inclined I am to think that there could ever be a good resolution. I know this is defeatist, and I don't want to demoralize anybody. And you shouldn't be demoralized, because you must fight every day. You must do the best you can every day to try to ameliorate things, even in the face of what appear to be insurmountable odds. You can't give up. If you give up, then you're just saying that nobody else in this world is worth being considered. Yeah, maybe I will never stop all the monkey hatred issues. But if I don't speak out, if I don't do everything I can to try to stop it, it's just going to go on. And I'm going to be responsible for it because I didn't speak out. I have to speak out.
Yeah.
What I would like to see, and I don't say this much, but I feel I better say it before I lose any opportunity to say it. I think that the key is human population control. I don't mean it in a negative or in a destructive way, but I think we, the one species in this whole planet who understands what's happening, at least to the extent that we can, and who has the power to do something about our impact on the planet, I think we have an absolute insurmountable moral obligation to go into negative population growth and get down to a point where we can truly be sustainable without resorting to exploiting other beings. I know there's always going to be some complication. I mean, you can't have agriculture without destroying property or habitat, et cetera. But right now we have so many people that we have to destroy millions of hectares of land in order to feed those people. Even if we fed them on a vegan diet, that's not the answer. The answer is going to be a reduction in human population. And we can do it. We can do it morally. We can do it humanely. It means self-sacrifice for people. It means not being selfish and saying that you have to have a child because you want the joy of having a child. It's not a joy of having a child. You're destroying the world by having a child. If you think about it, you need to think about it in terms of many, many generations into the future. What does it mean to have a child today? So I think that ultimately we need to go into negative population growth, get down to a population that we can deal with issues of energy, food supply, resources, other resources, housing, et cetera, in a way that can be at least quasi-compatible with what we have available to us, and which doesn't displace other animals to the extent that we're displacing them now. I mean, the big problem with non-human primates today, and other wildlife, of course, I don't want to neglect them, is that we're using up all their land. We are taking away their land on a daily basis. They have nowhere to go, so they end up going to people and creating so-called problems with people because they're looking for food, they're looking for shelter, they're looking for a way to sustain themselves. I don't know if you're aware, but the nation of St. Martin, which is in the Caribbean, they are planning to kill every vervet in the country within the next 3 years. There are over 450 individuals living in that country, and they have just approved the plan to trap and kill every one of them because one, there are problems between the vervets and farmers. And two, they consider the vervet to be a pest and an invasive species because they're not native to that country. They were brought there 400 years ago.
Wow.
They didn't come there. They were brought there as so-called pets 400 years ago, and they've multiplied.
Wow.
See, so we rather than looking at our own population and say, well, maybe we ought to try to retract a bit and give these other animals a chance to live. Instead, we say, no, we need to kill all these animals because we need their land, etc. So,
Yeah.
I know I'm not going to necessarily be very popular by proposing human population control, but it's in our own interest as well. It's self-enlightenment or enlightened self-interest, if you will, to do that. We're killing ourselves in the long run.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm not having children. I got my tubes tied. I'm kind of devoting my life to animals, but I do have some friends who they are wonderful people. They decided to have kids, and I'm like, I'm hopeful their kids are going to change the world for animals. But I do agree, it shouldn't be like a default that people just think like, oh, this is something I have to do. I have to marry, I have to have kids. But I do think there's also a future. We have so much new technology for nutrient production now, like with precision fermentation. They're now saying that we can feed the entire planet on an area the size of London, which is phenomenal. So I'm hoping we can get there. We definitely need to at least scale down animal agriculture. It won't be something that's done overnight. But yeah, that's a super interesting perspective. I love to hear, like, there are people like you who are like, we really need to focus on population reduction, which I think most people would agree with that. I don't think a lot of people think, yeah, let's just have 20 billion people on this planet. But it is very triggering to a lot of folks too. They're like, you're going to take away my right to have children. Like and nobody's taking away people's rights. I don't.
But eventually that right is going to be taken away because the planet's not going to sustain you. You're going to have your child. Your child's going to have their child, etc. But the number of generations down the road, there isn't going to be a planet to live on. And so you're not going to have children, not going to have anybody. And you're going to take everybody else with you. That's the thing that's so sad, is that everybody else, excuse me, on this planet who deserves to live here just as much as you and I do, they're going to be denied the opportunity for existence and pursuing whatever interests they have, et cetera. And that's just ultimately highly unfair.
Yeah, and people have told me, you're going to take away my right to eat meat. Well, with avian influenza, it showed us you might not get the opportunity to, because of these disease outbreaks, because we won't even have enough food to be able to transport it to these animals to feed them, to grow meat or eggs or dairy. So we can make decisions now, compassionate choices now, or it's going to be forced upon us later. So yeah, I'm just going to read some of the things in the chats. If anybody has any questions, I've come to the end of my discussion, but let me just read this. Erin Zamzow is very thankful for your support in 1989 when she was challenging the status quo. She took an alternative surgery class too. We've talked to her too. Rachel says she's applying to vet school in 2024, and this is what I've been most worried about. I'm so happy to know that there are resources and people out there who have been speaking out in vet medicine for years. Thank you. Also, everybody, please check out our newsletter. There's this octopus farming ban in Washington that
I think Crystal might be stuck because I see everybody.
Something happened. Everything froze and no volume or no audio.
Right. Well, in the meanwhile, Perhaps I
Is
can.
this Shreya?
Oh, yes. Sorry, my video is still off. I did not notice that. Yes.
Oh,
Hi.
okay. What, have
Yeah.
you been asleep in the background? You're not listening to this terribly important discussion?
This is like my lullaby. No, I'm just kidding.
No, I'm just kidding.
No, I've been engaging with the chat a bit and taking in everything. Do you know Dr. Lisa Jones-Engel?
Oh, yeah, of course.
Yeah, she's my colleague. I don't work with her on a lot of the cases, but she's my colleague at PETA. And so I
Yeah.
told her about this talk, and then she was like, oh, I'm going to be out of cell service, but Dr. Ned is awesome. So I just
Well, I
wanted
don't
to.
know about that, but Lisa and I are working together on different things.
Okay, yeah, I figured that you may have crossed paths with the work.
Oh,
that
yeah.
you're- Oh, yes, Erin knows Lisa as well.
Yeah, sorry
Um,
guys, this is an old computer and sometimes it just crashes randomly. But yeah, any final things before we go? Any final questions or anything from the chat?
There is Dr. Barbara Hodges from the HSVMA who would like to get in touch with you, Dr. Ned. So perhaps if you're okay with it, we can connect you all.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, you have my email address. You can give it, feel free to pass it on to anybody. I do check email regularly. I can't promise that I will respond in a voluminous way, but depending on what it is that people want, I'll do whatever I can to help.
Awesome.
Oh, cool.
There is
Okay.
one question from a pre-vet student.
Cool. Yeah. Are there any resources for pre-vet students wanting to gain in-person experience with vegan vets? Great question. Please reach out to me and we can put you in touch with either me or somebody else. I think and any vegan vets who want to help, please reach out to us too. And Peggy has raised her hand.
Yeah, hi, everybody. I certainly agree with everything that Ned has said, because over the long course of my life, I've been involved in medical research. I've been involved in certainly discrimination in vet school. I've certainly been involved with the AVMA at the time that I started the National Spay and Neuter Coalition. The AVMA was not in support of spay neuter. The AVMA allowed Dr. Cutler to put 30,000 chickens through a wood chipper in California, and they've never removed him from his spot on the Animal Welfare Committee, the poultry position. So I could probably talk an hour about some of the experiences that I've had too, but they certainly coincide with what Ned has been talking about. And I certainly agree with him on the population issue. So I just wanted to add a few things, that's all. Thank you.
Yeah. We should actually schedule a call with you because you have such an interesting story and everything you're working on. And yeah, the Dr. Cutler thing, I'm just thinking about the wood chipper thing. And it's like the wood chipper would be a humane alternative to what we are doing now with ventilation shutdown. And
I'm not ashamed to have to say that.
Yeah. I think all vet students are under the impression that because of welfare research, things have gotten so much better for animals. And in fact, they've gotten so much worse. Like,
yes, they have. Yes.
I've
been working for years on the rodeo issue, obviously, because I came from a rodeo background and I rode rodeo. I was a bronc rider when I was a kid. Then I worked as large animal veterinarian, worked on rodeo animals, but the AVMA supports rodeo. I can't make any changes with them. I finally left them after years of arguing with them. Flew to New Zealand here 3 years ago, had a series of interviews against rodeo, been working with them to try to stop it there. And I was thinking maybe if we could get it stopped in New Zealand and Australia, maybe it would catch on up here. But no, I went to the AVMA Animal Welfare Committee meeting one time and gave some information on rodeo with permission of a fellow that had given me private information. The AVMA Animal Welfare Committee, everything you say there is supposed to be private. It's not supposed to be released. I was barely back in Burlington when the Professional Rodeo Cowboys Association had everything that I had given the AVMA, including the name of the man who provided the information about the rodeo. He received death threats. He lost his job in Guyman, Oklahoma. The AVMA is one of the most rotten organizations on the planet, and I don't know how we can change them, but I'm certainly, I don't belong anymore, so I don't suppose I have any power, but what they did to you, I thought was ridiculous.
Yeah, it is pretty ridiculous. But the worse they are to me, like the more attention it'll get. So I think there's at least that solace, but I agree with you. It's kind of frustrating what we're up against. And it's just outrageous that they support rodeo, because here's a situation where we're not talking about raising animals for food or anything. This is pure entertainment. I'm a former rodeo queen contestant too. I came from that. I rode horses and everything. And now we were tried to ban rodeo in Alameda County, and now we're trying to ban some rodeo implements in Los Angeles.
Right.
So that's,
I'm working on that too.
yeah. Yeah.
What was I going to say about rodeo? It slipped my mind, but we've been working, Eric Mills, Steve Hendy and I have been working on this for years, and it doesn't seem to ever change.
Well, there have been a few so-called victories along the way. I wouldn't be too pessimistic about it, but you're right. Overall, it's pretty bleak. The thing that puzzles me about the AVMA, if you look at their policies and their various statements, one of the statements, and I'm going to have to paraphrase it because I can't remember the precise wording. It's short, but they talk about how non-human animals should be treated. Of course, they just use the word animals. And one of the terms that they use is that they should be treated in a way to minimize stress and to be humane.
Yeah.
And I don't understand how any intelligent person, an honest person, because you have to have honesty on top of everything, can look at the way cattle, sheep, goats, horses are treated in the rodeo and say that that's humane. It may be that the people are not purposely trying to hurt the animals. I will give that to them, that there isn't a purposeful trying to hurt them. But what they do to those animals cannot in any way be considered humane. And so by the AVMA supporting rodeos and other institutions, I don't want to just pick on rodeos, every institution, for example, pig races, et cetera, and then have a policy, a principle of caring for other animals that is supposed to embody humaneness, is just unbelievable. And I think that has to be challenged at every step of the way. We have to use that against the AVMA in everything we do. And I do that. Every letter I write where it's appropriate, every communication I make, if I can bring in the hypocrisy of the AVMA's policy, I do, because eventually maybe we'll get some honest language in there. It's not going to change anything as far as the animals are concerned, but I think one of the most important things that we have to try to get the so-called animal abusers to do is to be honest. They've got to use the language that describes what they're doing honestly and openly, and let the public make up their mind about whether they want to support that. There's no such thing as humane research. There's no such thing as humane slaughter, humane anything. When you're taking away the life of an individual, or you're incarcerating them in a cage, or whatever you're doing to them that's not in their interest, or they have no say in the matter, it's not humane. And the easiest way to try to convince somebody is to say, if you did that to your human child or to your loved one, would you consider it humane? And if you say no, then you have to at least say, okay, what I'm doing is not humane. Start right there. Be honest. It's not humane, but I think it's appropriate for X, Y, Z reasons. We need to be honest about things and how we describe and the words we use.
Well, I have backup proof for this, what happens with rodeo, because Bob Fetzner, he and I became friends. He was former head of FSIS. He was also a beat inspector in Cheyenne, Wyoming. And I have paperwork from him that documents the damage that's done to the rodeo animals that he's seen when they came into the slaughter plant. And then there's Dr. Robert Bay in Colorado, who autopsied some of the roping calves and described the damages to their necks and tissues in their cervical region. And so we have, this is proof. I mean, this isn't just, this is stuff that was hands-on information. So we can use this to say, you know, of course this isn't humane. Then another thing too, animals and human brains are wired pretty similarly. It's the amygdala is the fear center, and the prefrontal cortex and the hypothalamus are the pain centers. And we've got them. I mean, I've seen many human brain autopsies. My ex-husband's a neurologist. I worked for a neurosurgeon once upon a time. I used to go to human brain autopsies with this neurosurgeon. And the surprising thing was, over in the veterinary school, the makeup of the brain of the animals over in the vet school was the same as what I was seeing over in at Ohio State Medical Center. So, I mean, I have all this proof, and yet it's just kind of, nobody pays any attention to it, you know?
Yeah. It's shocking. Yeah. And I know that's kind of what inspired you, like seeing those brain slices and seeing that their brains are exactly like ours is kind of what inspired you to get started with this. And Rachel asks, how has your experience been working with non-lab and non-agricultural settings? How is education for people who want to work in sanctuaries, but do not want to participate in lab or animal agriculture medicine? Yeah, that's because we want people informed and knowledgeable, veterinarians informed and knowledgeable about these issues and agricultural practices, but many don't want to participate in them. And so it's like, how do we create trained veterinarians who are knowledgeable about these things, but also they're not violating their ethics? This is a huge challenge I run into. Do you have any thoughts, Dr. Ned?
Well, I don't know that you need any special training with respect to a particular species to be aware that they have interests, that they have fear, that they experience pain, etc. I think you can speak with a general veterinary medical degree. I think you can speak eloquently and with authority about any species, particularly mammalian species, because that's what we concentrate on in school. You don't need to compromise your ethics by getting experience, for example, as a general veterinarian. You can do that, and you can try to push for change, but you're going to be met with things every day that are going to be anathema to you and are going to be a source of intense emotional distress for you over time. You don't need to do that. I think get a veterinary medical degree and then start working in a practice. Let's say I'm just saying things, some thoughts out loud, and then volunteer for a sanctuary that deals with farmed animals, for example, if that's what your avocation is. You want to work with farmed animals, and then learn about them. You're going to have all the training you need to start educating yourself about farmed animals. As a veterinarian, you've got that background that's marvelous as far as being able to then translate that to other species. You don't have to exploit those species in order to do that. And then once you've had some experience with those animals and seen the kind of things that are being done to them, etc., when you've seen them rescued, then you can speak out with even more authority in terms of your experience in that regard.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I'm thinking of all those people on committees at the AVMA, on welfare committees and stuff. They actually don't do a lot of hands-on stuff with animals, but for some reason have become these experts because they've written papers on it. And you can become a diplomat for the American College of Animal Welfare and not necessarily have to do a whole lot of hands-on farm stuff with the animals, but writing research, reading and learning about these issues in a way that's effective. But also, if there's a lot of activists who do go on to factory farms, risk their freedom to participate, to see inside risk their lives. And we're here as vet students and veterinarians, we're given the opportunity to do that without taking any legal risk. So I think there's something to be said for just bearing witness and participating and being there, taking these livestock courses, even though you disagree with them, just to see what is said and then be able to speak about what you're being taught. But we have run out of time. Any final thoughts, Dr. Ned, before we go?
Just speak up. Speak out. Don't hesitate. Speak out. Be civil. Be a bit understanding of the other person's views, but don't back down. If you see something that you believe is inhumane, say so. If necessary, provide the evidence. Do the research and find the evidence to show why it's humane. And for those of you who aren't in veterinary medical school yet, go to veterinary medical school. And those of you who are in school, challenge the status quo. Don't let the administration push you into doing something that legitimately is against your moral beliefs and your moral principles, because those moral principles should be those of your administrators and your professors, the same principles. Challenge everything that you see that you believe is inappropriate.
Absolutely. Don't trust what you're being taught in vet school, and think for yourself. Yeah, so great advice, great words. And yeah, thank you for joining us, Dr. Ned. I look forward to talking to you more in the future. You're such an inspiration. And yeah, so.
Anyway, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you all. Y'all have a good day, and stay tuned for our next discussion, which is like March 5th or something.
March 5th. We have a series where we have conversations with vegan veterinarians who are, they just share their stories and journeys. So March 5th, 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Follow our honor on Facebook, Instagram. I've posted our website in the chat as well, so you can keep up with all the things. And definitely, if you know any veterinarians in your life, vegans in your life, aspiring veterinarians in your life, just send them our way. We're fighting the good fight, and we need all of us to come together. So,
all right, y'all. Well, you have a good day.
Bye.
I'll see y'all later.
Bye.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye.